What is going on today? I'm going to be going over the difference between the FAR BAR residential contract for purchase and the as-is residential contract for purchase. These are the purchase contracts that we use here in Florida. They are approved by Florida Realtors and the Florida BAR. That's why we call them FAR BAR. Once I talk about the differences between the two contracts, I'm going to go into strategy just a little bit and discuss when you might use either form. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, just a little bit of a disclaimer before we get into it. You're going to hear a lot of people talking about using either the FAR BAR or the as-is contract. Technically, both of these contracts are approved by the Florida Realtor Florida BAR, which means they're both FAR BAR contracts. But if somebody says they want it on a FAR BAR or they want it on an as-is, what they're talking about is here, just a regular residential contract for sale and purchase or the as-is contract for sale and purchase. As you can see so far from the beginning, both of the forms are exactly the same. They have the same first page, come down, they both have the exact same financing contingencies. Everything is the same there. The first time there's a change is when we get to section 9 about the costs and fees as to who's paying what. So let me get right in there. Closing costs, fees, and charges right here. Okay, section 9. This is where the first change is. Over on the left, that's where we have the residential contract. And so you can see right here, there is a request for repair allowances. So there's a general repair request right here, a WDO repair request, and then the third one is costs associated with closing out open or expired permits. So I would definitely not ever leave these blank. It would be very hard to get an offer accepted if you were trying to request 1.5% of the sales price in a repair request, but you can just put a dollar amount here, like you want $1,000 of repairs or you want $500 of repairs, something like that. You could even put in there, see additional comments, and put another note down in the additional comment section. All right, so as we continue down, things are, again, very much the same. Same sections designating who is designating the closing agent. So that's exactly the same. Warranty information. Then here we go down into the next section where there is a change, which is section 12 in the inspections and the rights to cancel. All right, here in this section, these are going to be your inspection periods for either contract. And here's where things get a little bit tricky to understand. So we are currently in the as-is contract right now, and we have in very plain language, this is very important. Okay, so let's see. If buyer determines in the buyer's sole discretion that the property is not acceptable to the buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice to the seller and during the inspection period, yada, yada, yada. If the buyer does so in a timely manner before the inspection period ends, then the deposits are returned to the buyer. We have it in very clear language here in this part of the contract that the buyer is able to cancel for whatever reason as long as we're in the inspection window and the buyer is able to get their deposits back. Now again, all of this is only going to come up in the event of a cancellation, but on the residential contract, it is a little bit trickier. So on the residential contract, during our inspection period, we still have at buyer's expense, they can conduct all of the inspections as normal. And there is a long list of descriptions that talks about how exactly the property is to be left before it's handed over. So everything has to be in working order and, can't be any leaks, things like that. But here's the problem. If you're using this residential contract for sale and purchase and your buyer wants to cancel, like say something comes up on the inspection and they just really don't like the house anymore, canceling can be a little bit tricky. So let me take you through some of the verbiage in the contract, right? Seller is only obligated to make such general repairs necessary to bring the items into the condition specified in paragraph 12B, which is up here, general condition, property condition right here. There's a little bit of verbiage here about submitting a repair request to your seller once the inspection report comes back, and if there's differing opinions, they can get another inspector. Then we come down to right here. If the cost to repair general repair items is equal to less than that of the general repair limit, seller will have the repairs made in accordance with paragraph 12F. If the cost cost to repair the general repair limit exceeds the general repair limit, then within 5 days after the parties receive the last estimate, a seller may elect to pay the excess. So they can, if you say, hey, we want all the stuff replaced and it's more than the general repair limit, the seller can go ahead and have those things replaced, or they can deliver written notice to the buyer and basically saying, I'm not going to replace those things and you have to deal with it, or the buyer can pay for those things. Basically, it kind of becomes like, we'll do up to the repair limit and everything else as is. But the tricky part is, if you make just a huge request of repairs because you want to cancel and get out of the contract, the seller is only obligated to make the repairs to get everything up into a properly working condition. And if they can get that less than whatever you put in for the repair budget, then you really don't have a case to cancel the contract. So you put yourself in this weird position where the seller might say, well, yes, we will replace all those things, even though you wanted to cancel. Now you're kind of in this catch-22 scenario where you're stuck, and it can be very tricky to get out of a contract in this way. That is why I suggest, if you use the residential contract for sale and purchase, you also accompany it with a right to inspect and cancel addendum, just in case something comes up, the buyer is able to cancel for any reason they see fit. They just don't like the property condition after the inspection. They can just cancel and walk away. If you don't have that right to inspect and cancel, it can cause a lot of problems if your buyers want to back out. So you add that addendum, you can look out for them.
Okay, so I'm here editing this video, and I just thought of 2 additional problems that often come from using these repair limits. The first one is, say you go to set a repair limit of like $1,500. Now, when you send that over, the seller feels like they're obligated to do $1,500 worth of repairs, which based off the contract they are. And a lot of times what we're really just going for is we want the sellers just to fix the things that are necessary to get the deal done, like just fixing the items that are going to come up for insurance problems, or just fixing the items that are going to stop the appraisal. And so here's the second problem. Say again, we'll use the $1,500 example. Say your initial offer goes over and you want the seller to pay $1,500 of repairs, and then the seller comes back and counters and says, hey, we only want to pay $500 of repairs. Now you could have the situation where the buyer thinks that the seller is hiding something and that there's some hidden problem, and that the buyer now thinks the seller doesn't want to make the repairs on this hidden thing, and it's all just for no reason at all. So that's another big reason why I don't even mess with the standard contract. I usually just go as is. You can still make repair requests on it as is. It's just all about how you do it.
Okay, after that section, things start to go back to pretty much the same. Scroll down, everything is pretty much the same. Just talking about all the standards, again, all same. Then you get down to, again, on the as-is side, and there's a little waiver about, saying that you're not going to sue the agents involved on the as-is side in case there was something that came up. Just a little extra waiver on the as-is side. Get down to additional terms, then everything else exactly the same. Okay, so just to recap, the big difference between the FAR/BAR contract and the as-is contract is the FAR/BAR has those requests for repair budgets and the as-is contract does not. And the FAR/BAR side is a little bit more complicated when it comes to a cancellation. So here's the other bit. Just because you use an as-is contract doesn't necessarily mean that you can't request repairs. Here's what you can do. Say you go under contract with an as-is contract, you do your inspections, and then some things come up on the inspection that will either hold up financing or it will keep the house from getting insurance, something like that. You absolutely at that point have the ability to go back and send a repair request to the sellers and say, hey, sellers, look, if you guys want to get that house sold, you're going to have to replace this and replace that so that the financing can go through. If you don't agree to make those repairs, then we have no choice but to walk away at this point. You're not necessarily putting a dollar amount on the repair budget. All you're saying is that the sellers need to get the property in a condition where it will meet the minimum requirements for financing and insurance, which you can totally do on an as-is contract. Just make sure you do it within the inspection period. Then if they don't agree, you can cancel, but chances are they're not going to cancel anyways, because when the next person comes along, they're going to have to make those same exact repairs in order to get the house sold anyways. So really, they'll probably just get it done. As long as you're not asking for a bunch of frivolous repairs that really don't matter with the as-is contract, then it really shouldn't be that big of a deal. Okay, now we're going to talk about when we might use either contract. If there's any sort of competitive speculative scenario where there's multiple offers or you're worried about the offer not getting accepted, you're probably not going to want to use the FAR/BAR contract because of those repair requests. There's going to be a lot of sellers that look at that and say, oh, well, they're asking for $1,000 of repairs. Let's just go with this other offer that is not asking for any repairs. Even though later on, the seller's going to have to make the same repair either way, no matter which contract they go with. It's just a matter of you're asking for it up front. And that's the reality of the situation. In my opinion, I would almost always use just the plain as-is contract because, like I said, if something comes up, you can always request repairs after. Just make sure you do it during the inspection period. Your as-is contract still has a financing contingency attached with it. So if something falls apart with financing, your buyer is not liable and they can still get their deposit back. And it's just way easier to cancel as long as you do it, again, in that inspection period. All right, and that's all for today. If this video was helpful, make sure you press thumbs up. If you have any questions, put them in the comments and I'll see you in the next one.